The first time I saw a human break protocol, I thought it was a malfunction. My name is Vorath Sen, xenopsychology analyst for the Galactic Defense Academy, and I've spent 2 decades studying the behavioral patterns of cadets from every sentient species in the known systems. Humans, though, they're the ones who made me start drinking fermented nebula extract after hours. Let me set the scene for you. The GDA's Advanced Combat Trials, year 2847. Station Kepler 9 hovering in neutral space where 17 civilizations send their best and brightest to prove they can handle real combat scenarios. We're talking life or death simulations here. Scenarios so realistic that 3% of participants suffer permanent psychological trauma. The Academy doesn't mess around. They want warriors, not tourists. The human cadet's name was Isadora Chen, but everyone called her Izzy, 22 standard years old, which, by human reckoning from that death world they call Earth, meant she'd already survived more than 2 decades of crushing gravity, aggressive microorganisms, and apparently a childhood sport they call soccer that involves repeated cranial impacts. When I reviewed her file, I nearly rejected her application. The psychological profile showed elevated aggression, stubborn refusal to acknowledge personal limitations, and something the human evaluator had labeled as an infuriating amount of optimism. I should have trusted my instincts. The trial was simple in concept, nightmare-inducing in execution. 7 trained combatants versus 1 defender. The defender holds a strategic position, in this case, a fortified bunker complex with limited ammunition, no resupply, and exactly 48 hours to survive. The attackers, they were specialists, each one a champion from their respective species. Leading the assault team was Krausath, a Vexian warrior with 4 arms and exoskeletal plating that could deflect plasma rounds. I'd watched him tear through reinforced bulkheads with his bare claws. The guy was basically a walking tank with anger management issues. Next came the twins, Yara and Yora, Silurian infiltration experts who could phase through solid matter for short bursts. Absolute nightmares in close quarters. Then there was Hexon, a praxis strategist, whose cognitive processing speed made him a tactical genius. This guy could calculate battlefield probabilities faster than our quantum computers. Rounding out the team were Nikos, a human male. Yes, another human, because apparently Earth produces an endless supply of these maniacs, specializing in demolitions. Talvesh, a Korvathi sniper whose 3 eyes could track heat signatures through walls, and finally Orin, a Threscan brute whose species was banned from 6 systems due to their casual disregard for the Geneva Conventions, all 29 versions of them. 7 apex predators, each one a specialist in violence. 1 human woman with a stubborn streak and approximately 48 hours to live. The oddsmakers, yes, we had betting pools, don't judge me, gave her a 3% servile chance. That was generous. I personally gave her 12 hours before she surrendered or got herself killed. Human or not, Deathworld survivor or not. Mathematics doesn't care about your planetary origin story. The trial began at 0600 hours station time. I was monitoring from the observation deck with 6 other analysts, our displays showing thermal imaging, tactical overlays, and real-time biometric data from all 8 participants. We could see everything. They were operating on limited information and combat instincts. Izzy started in the central bunker, 3 levels underground, with exactly 40 magazines of kinetic ammunition, 6 fragmentation charges, 2 weeks of ration bars, because the Academy loves psychological warfare, and a combat knife that looked like it had seen action before. The weapon had scratches on the handle. Later I learned it was her grandfather's from Earth's World War III. Sentimental. Adorable. Completely irrelevant to her survival prospects. The assault team entered the complex through 4 different access points simultaneously. Textbook infiltration tactics. Hexon had calculated the optimal entry vectors within the first 90 seconds. I watched his neural patterns light up on my display like a supernova. They were coordinating through encrypted channels, moving with practiced precision, each one covering the other's blind spots. Izzy? She was humming. Actually humming. Her biometric reading showed elevated heart rate expected, but also something strange. Her cortisol levels were high, yes, but her dopamine was spiking. She wasn't just managing fear, she was enjoying this. I should mention something about human neurology here, because it's important. Most species experience a fear response that triggers either fight or flight. Humans? They have a third option: fight harder. Their adrenal systems don't just prepare them for danger, they actively make danger feel rewarding. It's deranged. It's beautiful. It's absolutely terrifying when you're watching it happen in real time. The first contact happened 7 minutes into the trial. Talvesh, the sniper, had found a good vantage point overlooking the bunker's southern corridor. His thermal imaging had locked onto Izzy's heat signature. She was moving through a maintenance tunnel, completely exposed from his angle. He took the shot, a clean, professional kill shot that should have ended her participation immediately. Except it didn't, because Izzy had stopped humming approximately 8 seconds before he fired, dropped flat, rolled left, and was already moving again before Talvesh could recalibrate his aim. On our monitors, I watched the thermal replay 3 times. She hadn't seen him. The angle was impossible. She couldn't have known, but somehow she did. Pattern recognition, muttered one of my fellow analysts. A Korvathi named Sylvan. Humans evolved in environments where everything wanted to kill them. They develop predictive models subconsciously. That's not pattern recognition, I said, watching Izzy sprint through a corridor that should have been a kill zone. That's precognition. Don't be ridiculous. Humans aren't psychic. No, they're not. But they are the product of 4 billion years of evolution on a planet that actively tried to murder their ancestors every single day. They learn to read environments, to sense danger, to trust instincts that the rest of us civilized species bred out millennia ago. It's not magic, it's survival adaptation taken to its logical, horrifying extreme. Izzy reached a junction point and did something that made Hexon, the tactical genius, actually pause his advance. She triggered one of her fragmentation charges, not at the enemy but at a structural support beam. The explosion brought down half a corridor, sealing off the eastern approach entirely. She'd just cut off her own escape route. She's panicking, said Sylvan. Waste of resources. I disagreed, but didn't argue. I was too busy watching Krozath, the Vexian tank, rewrote his advance. He'd been approaching from the east. Now he had to loop around, adding 6 minutes to his approach time. Izzy hadn't panicked. She'd channeled the enemy exactly where she wanted them. The second contact was, well, let me just say that Nikos, the human demolitions expert, learned something important about his species that day. He'd planted shaped charges on the bunker's main entrance, calculated the blast radius perfectly, and detonated them expecting to breach the defenses. What he didn't expect was for Izzy to have anticipated this exact move, evacuated the blast zone, and positioned herself in the debris cloud with a clear line of sight to his position. She shot him 4 times before he could register what happened. Non-lethal rounds to the chest plate. This was a simulation after all, though the pain was very, very real and Nikos was out. First casualty. 11 minutes into a 48-hour trial, the human male hit the ground, his biomonitor flashing red, and I heard him laughing through the audio feed, actually laughing. Worth it, he groaned. Izzy, you magnificent psychopath. 6 against 1 now. Slightly better odds. Statistically still impossible. Hexon adjusted his strategy immediately, pulling the team back to regroup and reassess. Smart move. Izzy had just demonstrated that she wasn't going to play defensively. She was going to hunt them while they hunted her. The psychological dynamic had shifted. What happened over the next 6 hours was, frankly, the most educational display of asymmetric warfare I've ever witnessed. Izzy didn't defend the bunker. She turned the entire complex into a weapon. She used the ventilation systems to mask her movements, the electrical grid to create false heat signatures. And at one point, I'm not making this up, she recorded her own breathing patterns and played them through speakers in an empty corridor to bait Yara, one of the phase-shifting twins, into an ambush. Yara went down hard, 3-round center mass, eliminated at hour 4, 5 against 1. Talvesh, the sniper, got more cautious after that. He started hanging back, taking shots only when he had absolute certainty. Good strategy against most opponents. Against Izzy, it meant he was predictable. She spent 2 hours, 2 entire hours, memorizing his firing patterns, calculating his probable positions, and then she did something that still makes me question human sanity. She walked into his kill zone. Deliberately. Just strolled down a corridor she knew he was watching. Talvesh took the shot, of course. Center mass, perfect technique, should have been elimination number 2 for him. Except Izzy had worn her tactical vest backwards, with the plates covering her spine instead of her chest. The round hit armor, she spun with the impact, and returned fire in a move so fluid it looked choreographed. Talvesh never saw it coming. 4 against 1. 22 hours elapsed. By hour 30, the remaining assault team Krazoth, Yora, Hexon, and Orin had stopped coordinating. They were exhausted, frustrated, and beginning to make mistakes. Izzy, meanwhile, showed no signs of fatigue. Her biometrics were stable. She'd been rationing her adrenaline, pacing herself, treating this like a marathon instead of a sprint. Orin, the Threscan brute, finally lost his patience and went in alone. Bad move. Izzy had been waiting for someone to break formation. She'd rigged an entire section of corridor with tripwires connected to smoke charges, and when Orin charged through, he lost visibility for exactly 4 seconds, long enough for Izzy to empty a magazine into his position. He went down swinging. By swinging, I mean he actually punched through a wall trying to hit her, but he was 3 against 1. 36 hours in. The endgame was poetry. Violent, exhausting, beautiful poetry. Krazoth, Yora, and Hexon, the 3 remaining attackers, finally did what they should have done from the beginning. They stopped treating this like a tactical exercise and started treating it like a war of attrition. No more fancy maneuvers, no more trying to outsmart her. They were going to grind her down through sheer persistent pressure until her ammunition ran out. Her reflexes slowed, or her body simply gave up. Smart. Pragmatic. Would have worked against literally anyone else. But here's the thing about humans that I don't think the rest of the galaxy truly understands, and I'm including myself in that category, even after 2 decades of studying them. When you corner most species, when you push them to their absolute limits, they break. Their survival instincts kick in, and they surrender, flee, or collapse. Humans, though. Humans have this bizarre psychological quirk where extreme adversity doesn't shut them down, it activates something primal, something ancient, something that their ancestors used to hunt megafauna across frozen tundras and survive ice ages that wiped out entire ecosystems. They get stubborn. Aggressively, irrationally, magnificently stubborn. Izzy had approximately 12 magazines left. Minimal water, and she'd been awake for 38 consecutive hours in high-stress combat conditions. Her biometrics showed elevated stress hormones, micro-tremors in her hands, and the beginning stages of cognitive fatigue. Any reasonable being would have started conserving energy, playing defensively, hoping to outlast the clock. Instead, she went on the offensive. Hour 40. Yora, the remaining phase-shifting twin, made the mistake of using her ability one too many times. Phasing through solid matter requires enormous energy expenditure. The Silurians can only maintain it for short bursts before their cellular structure starts destabilizing. Yora had been using it to scout ahead, checking corridors before committing to movement. Standard infiltration protocol. What Yora didn't account for was that Izzy had been tracking the thermal signatures of her phase shifts. Each one left a brief cold spot where matter reorganized. Izzy had mapped out Yora's entire patrol pattern over 4 hours, calculated the energy expenditure rate, and predicted exactly when she'd need to rest. Izzy found her during a recovery cycle, materialized and vulnerable in a maintenance alcove. The engagement lasted less than 3 seconds. Yora was a trained infiltrator, a specialist in close-quarters combat, someone who'd won accolades from 6 different military academies. Izzy put her down with a combat knife to the biomonitor sensor pad, non-lethal per simulation rules, but the look of absolute shock on Yora's face as her elimination status flashed was priceless. The Silurian actually said through the audio feed, How did you before her system shut down? 2 against 1. 41 hours elapsed. 7 hours to go. Now it was just Krazoth, the 4-armed tank who could punch through reinforced steel, and Hexon, the tactical genius who'd been orchestrating this entire assault. The dynamic duo. The final bosses. The 2 most dangerous individuals in a field of already dangerous individuals. And they were scared. I could see it in Hexon's neural patterns. His probability calculations were becoming erratic, running scenarios over and over, searching for a solution that didn't end with them losing to a single human cadet. Krazoth's biosigns showed elevated stress markers despite his species' legendary emotional control. They should have been scared. Izzy had just eliminated 5 trained specialists, each one a champion, each one supposedly her superior in some combat metric. She'd done it while outnumbered, outgunned, and operating on minimal resources. And she wasn't. The bunker complex had 3 levels. Izzy had been operating primarily on the lower 2, using the confined spaces and narrow corridors to negate the attacker's numerical advantage. Now with only 2 opponents left, she made a choice that, tactically speaking, made absolutely no sense whatsoever. She went to the surface level, open spaces, multiple angles of attack, no cover. Every tactical manual ever written says you don't give up the defensive advantage when you're outnumbered. But Izzy wasn't thinking like a tactician anymore. She was thinking like a predator. And predators don't hide, they choose their battlefield. The surface level was a mock urban environment. Destroyed buildings, rubble-strewn streets. The kind of terrain you'd find in any war zone across the galaxy. Izzy positioned herself in what appeared to be an exposed position, standing in the middle of a plaza, visible from 3 different directions. "She's lost it," Sylvan muttered from beside me. "Fatigue psychosis. She's giving up." I wasn't so sure. I was watching her biometrics elevated, yes, but controlled, purposeful. And there was something about her positioning that bothered me, some calculation I couldn't quite see. Krazoth saw the opportunity and took it. Of course he did. He'd been trying to get a clean engagement for 40 hours, and now she was just standing there, practically offering herself up. He came in fast, all 4 arms ready, moving with the kind of speed that shouldn't be possible for something his size. Izzy didn't move, just stood there. Wait, Hexon, watching from his tactical position, saw it the same moment I did. "Krazoth, stop!" The trap wasn't mechanical, wasn't technological. It was psychological. Izzy had positioned herself directly in front of a structural weak point, a partially collapsed building that she'd spent 2 hours rigging with her remaining fragmentation charges, while Krazoth and Hexon were regrouping. She'd bet everything on one simple gamble that a warrior species like the Vexians, aggressive by nature and frustrated by 40 hours of guerrilla warfare, would see an easy target and charge. She was right. Krazoth got within striking distance. Those massive 4-armed monsters can cover ground like you wouldn't believe. And Izzy detonated the charges, not at him, at the building. 12 tons of ferrocrete steel support beams and reinforced plating came down like a localized avalanche. Non-lethal, per the simulation rules, but Krazoth's biomonitor went critical as debris pinned him down. Elimination. The Vexian would live, but his pride was definitely going to need medical attention. 1 against 1. 43 hours, 5 hours remaining. Just Hexon now. The tactical genius. The one who'd been analyzing her patterns, calculating probabilities, running every scenario through his superior cognitive processing. The one who'd just watched her eliminate his entire team through a combination of instinct, improvisation, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to lose. I've studied thousands of combat scenarios. I've seen brilliant strategies, last-second victories, stunning upsets. But what happened in those final 5 hours was something different. Something almost philosophical. It was a battle between 2 entirely different approaches to warfare. Hexon represented everything the Galactic Defense Academy stood for. Precision, calculation, tactical superiority, through intellectual dominance. He had the better position, the better resources, and a brain that could process battlefield variables faster than most species could blink. Izzy represented something older, something that predated tactical academies and military doctrine. She represented chaos, adaptation, and the kind of stubborn determination that built civilizations out of literal dirt and defended them against impossible odds. She was running on fumes, minimal ammunition, and pure spite. They played cat and mouse through the complex for 3 hours. Hexon would calculate the optimal approach, and Izzy would do something completely irrational that invalidated his calculations. He'd predict her movements based on resource conservation, and she'd waste ammunition on a deliberate miss just to reset his assumptions. He was playing chess. She was flipping the board. At hour 46, with 2 hours left, Hexon made his move. He'd finally calculated a scenario with a 97% success probability. He had Izzy pinned in a corridor with no exits, limited ammunition, and nowhere to retreat. He approached methodically, his weapon trained on her position, victory assured by mathematics itself. Izzy's voice came through the audio feed, and I'll never forget it. She sounded tired, yes, but also amused. Hey, Hexon, quick question. Did you calculate for human stubbornness in your probability matrix? Stubbornness is not a tactical variable, Hexon replied, professional to the end. Surrender with dignity. You've performed admirably. Yeah, that's what I thought. And then Izzy did something that made every analyst in the observation deck simultaneously gasp. She dropped her weapon. Just let it clatter to the floor. Hexon hesitated. His probability matrix didn't account for voluntary disarmament. What are you doing? Improvising, Izzy said. And then she ran straight at him. No weapon. No tactical advantage. Just a human woman from a Deathworld who'd spent 46 hours refusing to lose, charging at a being whose species had won interstellar conflicts through superior strategic planning. Hexon fired. Of course he did. 3 rounds, center mass. Perfect technique. All of them hit. But Izzy had angled her approach, accepting the hits on her tactical vest's armored sections. The pain would be excruciating. Those were high-velocity rounds designed to stop charging opponents, but non-lethal. She closed the distance before Hexon could recalibrate for a different target zone. What happened next was, frankly, educational. Humans have been studying hand-to-hand combat for their entire violent history. Every culture, every era, every conflict has refined techniques for hurting other beings when you've got nothing but your body as a weapon. Izzy used something called Krav Maga, an earth combat system developed by a people who'd spent centuries learning to fight while outnumbered and outgunned. She got inside Hexon's weapon range, struck his primary nerve cluster. Yes, she'd studied praxi anatomy and had him on the ground before his superior processing speed could formulate a response. 3 seconds. That's how long it took. 3 seconds to invalidate thousands of years of praxi tactical evolution. Hexon's biomonitor flashed elimination. Trial complete. Survival time, 46 hours, 17 minutes. 7 participants eliminated. 1 defender victorious. The observation deck was silent. Absolutely silent. Even Sylvan, who'd been predicting her failure since hour 1, just stared at the displays with his jaw hanging open. And Korvathi jaws are not designed for that expression, so it looked particularly uncomfortable. Izzy stood in that corridor, breathing hard, probably experiencing pain levels that would hospitalize most species. And she laughed. Not a manic laugh, not a victory celebration, just a tired, satisfied chuckle. 48 hours sounded boring anyway, she said to no one in particular. The post-trial analysis took 3 days. Every Xenup psychology analyst in the GDA wanted to understand what they'd just witnessed. We ran cognitive assessments, reviewed tactical decisions, interviewed all 8 participants. The consensus was uncomfortable but undeniable. Izzy hadn't won through superior tactics or lucky breaks. She'd won because humans have something most species bred out when we achieved civilization. They have the capacity to be absolutely, irrationally, gloriously feral when circumstances require it. They can flip a switch somewhere in their psychology and access the same survival mechanisms their ancestors used to dominate a planet that actively wanted them dead. And then, and this is the terrifying part, They can flip that switch back off and return to being perfectly reasonable, sociable, even gentle creatures. Dual nature species psychology, the reports called it. I called it nightmare fuel. Krasoth, the Vexian warrior who'd been buried under 12 tons of rubble, requested a rematch. He wanted another shot at the human who'd outsmarted him. The Academy denied the request. They were too busy trying to figure out how to incorporate human unpredictability variables into their tactical training programs. Hexon spent 2 weeks recalibrating his probability matrices. He eventually published a paper titled Limitations of Deterministic Combat Modeling When Facing Deathworld Species. It became required reading for tactical officers across 17 systems. As for Izzy, she graduated top of her class, naturally. Last I heard, she was commanding a mixed-species strike team on the Outer Rim, teaching non-human soldiers how to think like prey, fight like predators, whatever that means. Her teams have a 94% mission success rate, which is terrifying given the suicide missions they typically accept. The betting pools still exist. I told you not to judge me, and the odds on human participants have shifted radically. These days, when a human enters the advanced combat trials, the smart money isn't on whether they'll survive. It's on how creative they'll get while proving everyone's probability calculations wrong. Me? I still drink fermented nebula extract after analyzing human behavioral patterns. But now it's less about stress relief and more about celebrating the fact that, despite 2 decades of study, I still have no idea what they're going to do next. And honestly, that's the most exciting part of the job. 7 against 1. The Deathworld Cadet didn't slow down. She didn't need to, because humans don't slow down. They either stop completely or they accelerate straight through whatever's in their way. The galaxy is still learning that lesson, one impossible victory at a time.